The greatest comeback in Test cricket? They were given no hope. Australian fans, England fans, cricketing greats. There was not a person on this earth that would have backed Australia to win today. And if there was, I probably would have accused them of substance abuse. 180 runs left to chase. The number 1 and 2 ranked batsmen are already out. The morning was washed out and the clouds hung around for England to bowl under. It looked impossible. As the day progressed, Australia were losing wickets at regular intervals. And after Khawaja and Carey went in fairly quick succession, the tiny glimmer of hope that we were holding on to disappeared. But in came Captain Pat, aka Political Pat, aka Solar Panel Pat, and accompanying him was the first of 3 number 11s according to a certain English fast bowler, Nathan Lyon, aka Gary the Goat, or now just known as Gazball. They had 55 runs to chase together, with not only wickets being a problem, but also overs remaining. And they put on a clinic. Lofted drives for 6, tickles around the corner for singles, and probably one of the most sexual on-drives I've ever seen. And after what seemed about 650 hours of watching Pat and Nathan bat together, Pat Cummins seals the deal with a streaky edge down to third man, followed by one of many fielding mistakes from England to win the game and complete one of, if not the greatest Test comeback for Australia. So before we dive into the ins and out of the final day, the villains and the heroes of the Test match, I just want to emphasize how significant this win was for Australia. And not just in terms of how this sets up the rest of the series, which is also equally important, but people need to understand we don't win these games. If you have a look at Australia's track record in tight games, it is bang average. Off the top of my head, the last time Australia won in the last few overs of the day was when Michael Clarke had that super over against India and we skittled them late. And that was a game that we were way ahead in. We just had to finish it off. It's so rare for the Aussies to be behind for all 4 days and the majority of the 5th day and win the Test. And I think this actually speaks to how far and actually how good this current Australian team are in terms of squad depth and also in terms of mentality. What I mean by that, if we go back a couple of years, every time we would lose a couple of quick wickets, it would end up a full-blown collapse. I mean, any Australian supporter can relate because we all had this preconceived idea that today was going to be impossible because our PTSD, our cricketing PTSD, our alarm bells were ringing because we have been here so many times before. We've experienced this so many times and it always ends the same. We don't win. But the mentality from Australia, the grit, the determination, pretty much throw in any other cliche word that you can get, was just unbelievable. They stuck in there and they absorbed pressure. They weren't scoring runs very quickly, but they managed to keep themselves in the game throughout the entirety of the game. Whereas a few years ago, I couldn't see that happening. It also speaks to the squad depth that Australia have, because it's no secret that our best batsmen, or at least perceived best batsmen, are Smith and Marnus. And they both had little to pretty much no impact on this game. And again, in previous years, when these two have got out cheaply, it's resulted in the whole team going cheaply. So having this squad and having the likes of Khawaja, like Head, Green, Carey, that can step up when the main two aren't scoring runs is essential to this side. And I think it's one of the main factors that won them this game. So I think winning in this fashion isn't just, okay, we're 1-0 up in the series. It also shows to themselves and to the world that they're not going to give up when they're behind in a game and that they can still perform even when some of their best players are having a bad game. I think this is a real confidence builder going into the rest of the series. So this game was brilliant. I don't think anyone can disagree. This series probably had the most hype behind it for any cricket series I've seen probably over the last 5-10 years. And it didn't disappoint. We saw the new age England trying to bring tactics to the code that has not changed over the last 100 years. Walking at the bowlers from ball 1, trying to lap sweep the number 1 ranked bowler in the world for 6. losing 5 for 50 on an absolute road and still trying to score it at a runner ball. We even saw an overly aggressive declaration on the first day of the test. And then we saw the Australian team trying to fight their egos and figure out exactly what the fuck is happening and why is Boland just being hit for 16 off and over with 2 lap sweeps in it. And I'm not sure how it was for the neutral viewers, but for me, it was a spectacle. From ball one, it had the media in frenzy, it had the commentators bemused, it had legends fiery and angry right from the get-go. So I guess it was obvious that England were going to try play the way that they would. They were going to try and bring Bazball. But the golden question was, how was Australia going to react to it? Would they try fight fire with fire, or would they just play their normal game and see how things panned out? And in the end, I feel like we got a little bit of a mix of both. In terms of the batting, Australia played as they normally would do and batted relatively as they would any other game. But in the field, they did play fairly defensively. There was a deep point in from over 1, and only a couple of overs later, they brought in more boundary riders. And the whole world was talking about this, and 90% was negative. Because as we're watching this, and obviously our brains just have not been wired to see a boundary rider in the first over. It felt negative. It felt scared. It felt nervous. It felt, I guess, Twitter's most popular word, it felt un-Australian. And poor politician Pat has had to cop even more hate for this poor captaincy, but which, when we actually look at it, when we have the beauty of hindsight, it was actually probably the smartest thing to do. I mean, if we take a look at Zach Crawley, has one of the worst test averages for an opening batsman. If we see him walking down the wicket and slapping through the covers from ball 1 on an absolute slab of concrete of a pitch, then it probably was smart to approach it with the idea of let's restrict their boundaries and frustrate them to a point where they're going to play a stupid shot. And despite all of the criticism that Pat and McDonald would have copped, they were 5 for 150 on a road. And if it wasn't for Bairstow going absolutely massive and some root brilliance, then we could have got a really big first innings lead on them. But also on that note, who would have known how the game would have gone had Stokes not been so aggressive with his captaincy and declared in the first innings? I've been seeing a lot of posts recently emphasising that only one team tried to force a result, which I disagree with, because Australia were actually never in a position to force a result. But at the same time, I do also agree, because Stokes' captaincy was really the whole reason behind why we got to witness such a good test match. I'm also seeing a lot of people calling out Stokes on all the social medias for his day one declaration, which again, having the magic of hindsight, it seemed to be the wrong call. But I think besides that, England and Stokes in particular played this match pretty much perfectly. We can't forget, they were running the show right up until the last hour or two of the test match. And again, if it wasn't for some really, really poor fielding and some pretty average bowling, then Australia would have lost that match. And they potentially would have lost that match by a lot. It was just so interesting to see the different tactics go head to head and seeing what would become of it. What would the end result be when two teams are playing such different styles of cricket? So we had a few heroes in this game and only the one villain, which it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to figure out who that one was. But we're going to start with the people's champ, Usman Khawaja. 200 runs for the game, about 6 million balls faced, and about 763 hours of batting time at the crease, and became one of only a handful of players to bat on all 5 days of the test. But Uzi was just brilliant. His form since being selected has been unbelievable, and he seems just to keep getting better. It's his first 100 in England, so now he pretty much has 100s all around the world, or at least all the top cricketing nations. He's pretty much scored 100 overseas there. He is so good, he's even taking his celebration to the next level. How many times have you seen someone score 100 and throw their bat in the air? I mean, all class. But in all seriousness, it was a perfect start for Uzi. Runs on the board early in a series where he's previously struggled. He's never really got runs over in England. But in all seriousness, it was the perfect start for Uzi. Runs on the board early in a series that you've previously had massive struggles in. And also, just another big you to everyone that doubted him. Unfortunately, he is not the only batsman making it look easy out there, because the second hero of the game is Joe Root. He may have dropped some important catches throughout the game, but his batting is out of this world. I said in the last video, he's probably one of the best batsmen that England's ever seen, and I'm still sticking with it. The ability someone must have to completely change the way they bat. From coming from a very traditional batsman, lots of technical ability, would play smart along the ground all the time, to completely reinvent himself under Brendan McCullum, to score at a run the ball, to start playing lap sweeps and reverse sweeps, and to not have a dip in form, but for his form actually to go up, for his average to increase and score the amount of runs he is scoring is just insane. He is one of those players, as an Aussie supporter, you start watching him bat and you just think, how the are we going to get him out? He still has that technical side to his game and he can play properly, but the way that he's added so many more shots to his book just makes him such a dangerous batsman, and his ability to take on pretty much any attack now is scary. I'm just going to say it. I'm scared. Joe Root worries me, and he's going to be a big problem this series. Our next heroes we've already spoke about briefly, so I'll only touch on this, but Pat Cummins and Nathan Lyon. Both unbelievable with the ball, picking up key wickets at key times. Just as it felt the game was slipping and England was starting to take full control, it was either Cummins or Lyon taking a wicket and keeping us in the game. But then to come in and bat under immense pressure and to grind out the last 55 runs in the fashion that they did it was brilliant. I think Cummins was averaging something like 12 since 2019 coming into this game, and he scored a 40 in the first innings and a 40 in the second innings, and he looked good while doing it. He knew when to defend, he chose the right time to attack bowlers. It was just really smart batting. And then Nathan Lyon up the other end only made 15, but it was probably the biggest 15 of his life. And again, he looked really solid. He defended well, he tickled round the corner for singles when he needed to, and he also played probably one of the sexiest on drives I've ever seen. Now, it may look sexier because of the conditions they were playing under and because it's Nathan Lyon, but that on drive, oh man, it gets me going. It gets me going. Which gets me on to the only villain of the game, and big shock, it's Ollie Robinson. Now, I don't know what has been going through his head. Honestly, I just think he was way too horny for the Ashes to start. And everyone knows being overly horny is never going to end well. It's almost like he had these intrusive thoughts and he just couldn't keep them bottled in. It started pre-series when I think he had a claim that they were going to win 4 or 5-0, something like that. Pretty stock standard sledging, whatever. Then he came out by calling the Australian tail a bunch of number 11s, which I actually didn't disagree with prior to this game. But I just wouldn't be stupid enough to call them out before the game has started. And the reason I wouldn't say that is just in case they came out and played really well and you look like an idiot, which is exactly what happened. I don't know, karma is obviously a very real thing and it has hit him hard. It has slapped him for 4. So if those antics weren't enough, then once we got into the game, he has decided to pick out the nicest bloke on the other team. Out of everyone you could have chose of the Australian team to start sledging, you pick Usman Khawaja, who has just scored 140 runs and also not said a single word to the England players while scoring these 140 runs. And Ollie Robinson gets him out and gives him a big old send-off. And then when he's questioned about it that night, he starts name-dropping players from 15 years ago about they used to do it, so I should be sweet to do it. Which has just gone and annoyed past legends of the game. And all this is happening while he's steaming in, bowling 120-kilometer right arm porridge, and it's ended up that they've scored the winning runs off him. So in the game full of winners, with even the likes of McCullum doing interviews saying he's happy with his team, they put on really entertaining cricket. Root posted on Twitter that he's so happy and he loves this team. So even the losing team is happy. Pretty much everyone won in this game except Ollie Robinson. So all in all, it was one of the all-time tests and there was no shortage of drama. And we get to do it all again next Wednesday when the second test starts. I'll see you there.